Ace Combat 3 Electrosphere. A sprawling, choice-driven, story-heavy cyberpunk corporate dystopian tale with a tinge of posthumanism. It's the lost game of the series. The version we got in the West was a watered-down shadow of what the original game was. It's not even considered canon. The original Japanese version was impenetrable to anyone who doesn't speak Japanese until an English patch was developed by Project Nemo, released in 2016. More recently, the Loadword team has released their English patch of the game as well as Spanish and Italian versions. For the purposes of this video, I've chosen to use the Loadword team's patch. You may be wondering why Electrosphere was not fully translated and brought to the West. Well, there are no concrete answers that I could find, but I can take a guess. There was a localization in progress, but Namco cut it off part of the way through. I'm assuming some suit at Namco decided they weren't going to make their money back, and so we got the butchered version in the West. The expense that would have been incurred by localizing the entire game should not be understated. Not only does it need to be translated, but also dubbed. Electrosphere is easily the most story-heavy game in the series, featuring lengthy voiced cutscenes between missions where characters talk to you or news reports play, and a lot of appendix entries with explanations of various terms used in-game. There are even animated cutscenes produced by some unknown indie animation studio. I think the name is Production IG. They made something called Ghost in the Shell, and some people liked it, I guess. Basically, the game is a visual novel, and sometimes you dogfight. Imagine the US in 1999. Japanese media wasn't nearly as popular as it is today. Sure, we had Toonami in the 90s showing Dragon Ball Z and G Gundam, but only the weebiest of weeaboos were reading visual novels back then, and I think that's why Namco pulled the plug on the localization. Now, real quick, before I get into the meat of the game here, I'm going to talk about stuff that isn't about the story first, and then I'm going to get into detail on what happens during each story route. I'll give a warning before getting into spoilers, but if you're curious about the game, I highly recommend that you go play it for yourself first. I'll leave a link in the description to a good video for how to apply the translation patch. It's the same one that I used. Oh, and once you're done playing, please come back, I need the watch hours. Also, I feel like this is important to note, because I know people are going to be commenting certain things. All of this is based on my very first blind playthrough. I finished all routes, played every mission, saw the true ending, but did a minimal amount of replaying. You can find my streams if you want, it's all on my channel. I just mentioned this because I'm not as immediately familiar with Electrosphere as I am with Skies Unknown. If you've played an Ace Combat game before, Electrosphere is going to feel familiar to you. It's still the same arcade flight combat game, or maybe that should be the other way around because it released in 1999. Anyway, the major additions that Electrosphere made to the franchise is the ability to look 360 degrees around you and weapon selection before sortying. One thing that I found consistently frustrating, however, is how slow everyone seems to be flying. I can't speak for anyone else, but I typically have the need for speed. And that meant I was overshooting every enemy, all the time. Trying to break that habit and slowing down didn't seem to help much either, since dogfighting isn't easy when everyone is flying at your stall speed. Oh, and the shit PS1 graphics don't help with this. It's hard to get a visual on a target when it's rendered at 1 pixel by 3 pixels and is phasing out of existence depending on how close you are. Speaking of getting close, missile range is just bad. Get used to really short range. Also, get used to the tracking being awful. I suppose this evens out because there are less overall targets per mission than later games, but playing Electrosphere after playing the modern games, you can feel its age. Now, of course, there is a wide selection of aircraft to choose from, many of which are entirely original and some that are not. On pretty much all of the pre-existing aircraft, like the F-16, Namco just slapped some canards on the fuselage and gave it a funny bird name. The same shape is there, but it's just legally distinct enough to not have to pay licensing fees to Lockheed, Boeing, and General Dynamics. Some of the original aircraft are legit really cool, but you don't get to see too much of them because, well, your selection is entirely restricted to what faction you're aligned with. At the end of each route, you're stuck with one plane, no options. Completely absent is the credit system. You won't be buying any jets because they're being supplied to you, which makes sense if you think about it for 2 seconds. Mission types will also feel familiar to you if you've played other Ace Combat games. Typically, they'll just be focused on destroying priority targets, with extra targets contributing to your overall score. Sometimes they get wacky, like just flying through tunnels, or the mission where you literally go to space. I'll get into that one soon. Generally speaking though, you've got the same canyon runs, boss fights, defending units type of stuff. Remember those cutscenes I mentioned where people talk to you? They happen in between every mission, and they're all very one-sided conversations, for silent protagonist reasons. This all happens in an internet-esque interface called Data Swallow, which accesses the Electrosphere, AC3's version of the internet, in order to transmit data. From this same interface, when the dialogue ends, you can look up terms, change settings, or continue to the next mission. The terms page, in particular, is very important for understanding the world of Electrosphere, as not everything is explicitly explained to the player. It's also kind of cute because the method for looking up these terms is using a search program called Peekaboom, and it's just a nice little touch that sort of makes it feel like you're using the internet. The whole internet browser of the future shtick is kind of adorable in 2024, but it's a good step towards immersion. I'd be remiss to not mention the music in Electrosphere. Much like the other games in the series, the music stands out here. Everything is very electronic and synth, heavy on the drum kits, sometimes almost feeling like an EDM track. Others are much more ambient, creating an atmosphere of mystery and tension. Or even just a sense of weirdness, like something doesn't belong here. I feel like some of the soundtrack lacks a little bit of character, because it's hard to remember how it sounds. Part of how I judge if a game's music is good is if I'm still mentally listening to it when I'm not playing. And that requires remembering it in detail. The one track that really does this for me is the main menu music, Linkage. It's a banger. Of course, going back and listening to the soundtrack after finishing the game, most of it feels familiar and it's still fun to listen to. There aren't any huge emotional musical moments here, but the soundtrack does its job well. So, like other Ace Combat games, I can recommend listening to the OST on its own. So that about covers all of the general gameplay things, and next I'm going to get into each story route and spoil the hell out of them. Here's your warning. Check the description and play the game yourself if you're at all interested. The TLDR is that Electrosphere is an interesting experience and it's worth it. If you're already familiar with the story and you want to see me lose my mind, skip to whatever timestamp I edit onto the screen for when I dive into some very particular details. The year is 2040. Two megacorporations are vying for power on the continent of Usea, General Resource and Newcom. National governments have lost all semblance of power and control, yielding to the influence of the corporations. You, callsign Nemo, are a pilot for the Universal Peace Enforcement Organization, under the authority of the Neo-United Nations. Headed by Delegate Gabriel Clarkson, Upeo tries to maintain peace between the corps through negotiation, but the tension breaks at Faith Park when Newcom attacks General Resource, starting the intercorporate war. You and other Upeo pilots Fiona Fitzgerald, Eric Yeager, and Reina Hirose are dispatched to deal with the attacking Newcom force. Rena in particular is an important character with a lot of screen time. She's Yupeo's ace, and she suffers from what's called Silverstone Syndrome, a condition that makes her very allergic to the sun, so she has to wear a spacesuit everywhere. After this initial attack, these pilots are transferred to the Special Armed Response Force, or SARF, within Yupeo, and they begin a training mission alongside General Resource. Here, you're introduced to Abyssal Dijian, yes, that's his name, and Keith Bryan, General's top aces. Mission 4, Paper Tiger, is when you're first given a choice. Yupeo and General are executing a preemptive attack against Newcom at their headquarters on the floating city Megafloat, yes, that's its name. The mission is interrupted when you're informed that Clarkson has negotiated a ceasefire between the corps. Dijon is very unhappy with this outcome and offers you a choice to defect to General to change the world. This is our first divergence point. We're sticking with Yupeo for now, so Nemo declines Dijon's offer. Now, hostilities between the corps are higher than ever before, as General breaks the ceasefire and attacks a Newcom base. Previously, you were just defending against Newcom's aggression, but now you're fighting General too. The player and Rena are tasked with tailing a General Resource surveillance plane, weaving through canyons towards a secret research base. Rena starts recovering strange memories of this research base and Dijon. Something about a Night Raven? Very weird. Anyway, you destroy the base. Or maybe not, because it's possible to not discover the research base. I feel like you have to purposefully go out of your way to not discover that place, but if you don't, you'll move on to Fragile Cargo, possibly the most pointless mission in the entire game. A terrorist group with no affiliations to anyone tries to crash an airship filled with chemical weapons into a city, but you stop them and nothing happens as a consequence. The only noteworthy thing you get out of this mission is that Fiona mentions her sister for the first time afterwards. Assuming you did find the secret research base, you'll begin no clearance. Before that, however, we see some old footage of scientists congratulating a young, creepy-looking Rena for finally accepting herself and overcoming her Wait, no, that's Evangelion.
My life is worth living here!
Who knows what's happening here? Anyway, Rena wants to locate the Night Raven at a General Resource base, in a jet somehow, without authorization, and you join her. SARF's commander, Commander Gilbert Park, yells at both of you to return immediately. This is your last chance to turn back and do the pointless terrorist mission, if you really want to. If you continue with Rena, a GR squadron and Dijon show up. Rena yells at him over the Night Raven, blaming him for her losing it. The GR squadron is destroyed, and everyone forgets about the whole unauthorized flight thing. Afterwards, Delegate Clarkson, in a private jet accompanied by Fiona as security, is on the way to a peace conference. A squadron of GR aircraft show up to shoot him down. You successfully defend him. Then, Commander Park suddenly tells you that Clarkson and Fiona are Newcom agents and must be shot down. Comms from their private jet are conveniently jammed. Rena basically says, well, orders are orders and I have no conscience. This is the next divergence point. You can shoot the jet down, obeying orders and staying with Yupeo, or shoot down the accompanying fighter, which I'm pretty sure is Eric, and then defect to Newcom. To finish out the Yupeo route, we have to obey Park's orders and shoot down the private jet, killing Clarkson and Fiona. And if you take too long, Rena does it for you. Afterwards, Eric starts realizing that perhaps he's a pawn in the political game that Yupeo is playing. The news makes it more obvious that Yupeo's methods of peacekeeping will be more focused on armed intervention now that Clarkson is gone. This is like if the UN peacekeeping forces intervened in major conflicts by attacking everyone. The next 4 missions don't have anything hugely consequential happening. They're various operations against both corporations. We'll see some of these same missions later from different perspectives. Except for Bug Hunt, which in itself is just a really weird mission because these nanobots you have to bomb are capable of hacking into your jet and it makes the screen all fuzzy and weird. It's one of the more unique missions, but isn't that important to the story. The mission Pawns in the Game is when things start to change. You're attacking General Resource armories, but you are forced to use Newcom aircraft with Newcom markings. Very, very sus. This is a move by Park to continue the fighting. Hostilities escalate yet again, and Dijon reveals his gambit to change the world. Ouroboros, an organization meant to destroy the corporations and begin the process of transforming humanity via sublimation. Sublimation here refers to the process of copying a human mind into the Electrosphere, something that's already happened to Dijon. He thinks this is the step into the future that humanity needs. Commander Park reveals that he's a part of Ouroboros, he made a deal with Dijon, and dissolves Sarf. Meanwhile, Dijon tempts Rena to his side by offering the Night Raven, which she really wants for flying reasons, but also she wants to kill him. Meanwhile, Eric doesn't know what he's fighting for, and decides that destroying Ouroboros is the next step. Rena flies out in the X-49 Night Raven, attacking the Led Zeppelin, and Dijon hits the self-destruct button for the Night Raven. You and Eric destroy the airship, killing Dijon. Eric is righteously pissed off, and declares that Commander Park is next on the chopping block. After fighting what's left of Upeo, you destroy the helicopter that Park is riding. Now that everyone has been fucking murdered, Eric asks, "What now?" as they fly over Rena emerging from the wrecked Night Raven. So, the next route we're taking is the General Resource story. This begins at Paper Tiger, where we choose to defect with Dijon. Y'all remember how General is the one who broke the ceasefire? Yeah, you're a part of that now. You destroy some stuff on the Mega Float, and depending on how fast you do this, determines your next mission. Destroy all targets within 3.5 minutes, you get to go with Dijon on a hunt for the Night Raven. If you're slower than that, well, I guess you get to hang out with Keith and blow up some more Newcom property. Oh, you guys remember how General ambushes Clarkson's jet? Yeah, you're doing that now. You shoot him down. And Fiona. You killed Fiona. Next, you're intercepting some stuff in the stratosphere in a totally not an SR-71 Blackbird, but it's called a Blackbird anyway, but don't worry, it's legally distinct. Keith finds himself in a spot of trouble, and whether or not you save him is yet another branching mission. This is noteworthy because if you don't help Keith, you move on to technology transfer, which has you intercepting a missile launch. Does that look familiar? It will be later. Also, hey, we're in the Kimona Islands. This probably won't be a noteworthy place in later games, right? Here we are at the next point of divergence. Mission 28, Dilemma, has you attacking Newcom yet again, but this time, Dijon is like, "Hey, I made this cool guy club called Ouroboros, you wanna join?" And for now, we refuse him to stay with our best buddy Keith. From here on, you can only fly one of the coolest fighters in the game, the XFA-36A Game. It's kind of a silly name, but at least it looks cool. Anyway, you kick the shit out of Newcom while they're down, and then Ouroboros shows up in their Zeppelin. Rena's Night Raven shows up, and here we have another time trial challenge. Do enough damage to the X-49 within 3 minutes, and you get a bonus mission. Mission 31, Geofront Attack, is a weird one because what the fuck is a geofront? Up till now, we have not heard anything about this place. You'd think it would be a big deal having a city underground like this, but I guess not. Oh, and it comes with a self-destruct that you try to kill Reyna with, which doesn't work. I'm assuming we just third impacted a city's worth of people down there. Anyway, we're back at Port Edwards to destroy the Night Raven, which we do, and Dijon shows up in a superplane that breaks the laws of physics, because he has no blood or soft tissues. Keith gets hit, but before he goes down, he kills Dijon. And then, a bunch of Night Raven type of aircraft show up. Turns out, these are experimental Newcom aircraft called Geopelias. No explanation is given for why they're here, or specifically where these things are from, but they're covered in anti-missile Teflon. Then, somehow, you hack into one? And remotely control it at the same time as your own fighter? This isn't explained. The Geopelia is overpowered and looks like a flying stingray. You fly off into the sunset victorious. Remember, you have to land somewhere, and you get a nice view of your fighter's empty coffins. Back to Dilemma, we once again choose to join Dijin on his merry post-human terrorist adventure. To cut down Newcom, you're tasked with destroying highways and bridges around Port Edwards. Take more than 90 seconds and you get to do another mission attacking Newcom. Rena uses Night Raven to destroy Make a Float and probably kill thousands. Again. Newcom is finished. Next on the chopping block is Upeo. Before that happens, however, we have a weird flashback. We see a general resource building through security camera footage. Inside is a female scientist and Dijin lying on a table. This is the first sublimation experiment. Dijin's consciousness has been copied into the Electrosphere. Unknown soldiers run through the hallway. Meanwhile, Dijin is horny and starts making out with a scientist, whom he calls Yoko. They're too busy banging to notice that a bomb has been planted right outside their door. However, Electrosphere Dijin is watching all of this through the cameras, unable to warn them. The bomb explodes, destroying the building. Yoko and the real Dijin are dead, but Dijin's copy remains. Back to Expo City to kill Park just like last time, as prophecy has foretold. But this time, Rena remembers all the human experimentation she endured. We learn that Dijin is ultimately responsible for being the X-49's test pilot. Rena suddenly screams and complains that somebody is in her head. Dijin says something about contact loading and deletion and says you are the enemy. I wonder who you is supposed to be. Your boy Keith shows up as Dijin blames you for erasing Rena's memory of him previously. A dogfight with Rena commences, ending with Keith wedging his fighter in between the Night Raven's wings. He sacrifices himself so you can get a clean hit. Keith and Rena die in the explosion. It is once again time to destroy the hot air balloon and attempt to kill Dijin. This is the iconic mission of this game, and the mission that bears the subtitle of the game, Electrosphere. Dijin sprayed his fighter with Missile Begon, and it's stupidly difficult to get a hit on him. Get a few hits, and then you can chase Dijin into the Electrosphere, somehow, because you're totally not an AI or anything. And the trippiest dogfight ever conceived follows. Seriously, this shit is as disorienting as it is awesome. I don't know how a jet in meat space gets shot down by being destroyed in the internet, but you do it. Dijin says something about you being Simon, whoever the hell that is. Afterwards, you see a news report commenting on how the wreckage has no evidence of a body. If you're not a monster and you don't kill Best Girl Fiona, well, it turns out she and Clarkson really were defecting to Newcom, and so did you. Honestly, this is one of the cooler routes in the game. Fiona has a sister who's an ace pilot for Newcom, Cynthia. She's cool, I guess. Anyway, you bomb a general resource base as expected, and there's another mission branch here. But get this, destroy less than 6 radar sites, and you get to go to space. Like, what the hell? It's like getting rewarded for failing. Zero gravity is such a cool mission, and, well, all you're really doing is shooting down some satellites on a strict timer. But it's in space, and you get a cool space fighter with lasers and shit! Also, hey, remember that missile you shot down back in the general resource route? That's this spacecraft. You notice all these missions are kind of the same event from different perspectives? It's neat. And if you destroy all the radar sites, well, you don't go to space. This alternate mission isn't worth talking about, it's not in space. I'm getting ahead of myself a little here. Before you begin Zero Gravity, we get to meet Simon for the first time. He's cryptic, saying he's fascinated by your achievements and that you're better off not being noticed by anyone. Gee, I wonder why this Simon guy is so important. After the coolest fucking thing ever, you get back on with attacking General, and Ouroboros shows up with its human instrumentality livestream. Turns out Cynthia is really into this idea. We get a whole cutscene where Fiona is arguing with her about it. And here we are at, you guessed it, a point of divergence. We'll be sticking with Best Girl Fiona for now. Newcom HQ correctly prioritizes Ouroboros as the major threat and sends you to strike their forces, aka shoot down the Hindenburg. Cynthia is there escorting it, and Fiona tries to get her back, but she ain't having it. Yet another optional mission is shoved in here. Damage the Goodyear balloon enough within 90 seconds, and you're rewarded with an extra mission in which you get to kill Cynthia. Hooray! Fiona is not very happy about this. Rena destroys Megafloat as the ancient texts have prescribed, and you chase her and Dijon into the Geofront. Before we get into Nerve HQ though, we have a tunnel mission! I sure hope this becomes a franchise staple, since there's only so much platforming you can do in a jet. In all seriousness though, this is probably the best tunnel mission in the series. It's actually fun, and it's a standalone mission. So if you fail, you don't have a bunch of fighting to redo. So, we're in Nerve HQ, fighting Rena and Dijon, and in this timeline, the X-49 has a new MacGuffin. It has this thing called an Aeon generator. I guess it wasn't important until now, because this is the first time we're seeing it. Simon Cohen shows up out of fucking nowhere and says he needs to hack into the Night Raven in order to give us an opening to attack. So, that's what you do. You kill Rena and Dijon. Yet again. During the ending cutscene, we see a depressed Fiona sitting in her apartment. She's understandably upset about her sister. And then, on the monitor, Electrosphere Cynthia shows up. In a move that is not at all upsetting, Cynthia thanks Fiona for destroying her physical body and extols the magnificence of living inside the Electrosphere. Fiona continues being sad. I am now sad. For the Ouroboros portion of the Newcom route, we shall be joining Cynthia when she makes the offer. I mean, why would you decline an offer from someone like her? Are you crazy? Also, Fiona dies, I guess? Maybe? It's not really shown, we just get a news report. We don't see her again anyway. Dijon sends you to capture Rena, because the Night Raven, blah blah blah, we've seen this several times already. Back on the hot air balloon, yes, I know its name is Firna, I just think it's silly. Cynthia gets into an argument with Dijon over what he's doing, which isn't actually trying to get everyone to sublimate like Cynthia wants. It's about destroying the world order. Her spaghetti gets upsetty, and she shoots the camera Dijon was viewing her from like a badass, and decides that this ain't worth it. Cynthia drags you along to rejoin Newcom. You're fighting above Megafloat trying to defend it, when Rena appears and commits her usual war crime, as the scrolls predicted. It is now time to shoot down the Zeppelin again, and kill Dijon again. Honestly, shooting him down here is kind of anticlimactic. Anyway, you are once again chasing Rena into the Geofront for reasons. She's a squirrely motherfucker, and it's difficult to get a hit on her, but once you get a few hits, then you leave the Geofront, like why the hell were we even there, and you're back in Port Edwards. That's when Simon shows up out of nowhere again, declaring you have to destroy the big-ass Aeon generators that most definitely were not there before now. This fight sucks. Rena is glued to your ass like white on rice. She's stupid fast, and the X-49 has never been this difficult to deal with. The only way to get this mission done is to hit the afterburner and never let up. Missiles didn't hit because of the generator's pylon thingies? Get wrecked! Guess you're going to loop back after circling the mission area. Once you destroy the Ionosphere, yes, that's what it's called apparently, you can fight Rena. She just slowly drifts in a straight line, the difficulty curve just inverted itself. Cynthia says she'll follow you wherever, and y'all fly into the sunset. Cut to Newcom HQ, here we see Simon at his epic PC gamer setup. He takes his Apple Vision Pro headset off and somehow manages to look creepier than he already did. So, once all other endings have been achieved, Simon reveals to you through a video call that yes, you are a program, This is a simulation, and he's been Doctor Stranging his way through all possible scenarios to see if you're guaranteed to kill Dijon. And you are. Why does Simon want Dijon destroyed? Well, he has some kind of relationship with Yoko. Remember that one flashback with Yoko, and she sublimated Dijon and then assassins exploded them? Simon blames Dijon for that, even though it was because of Yoko's research that General wanted her dead, but you know, details. Simon declares you a success, deletes the simulation, and releases you into the real world. I think we can safely assume that after Nemo is released into the world, Simon begins orchestrating the intercorporate war. My feelings after seeing the true ending can be summed up as, what the fuck? Look, as an Ace Combat game, it's pretty good. It has its highs and lows, but overall I think it's a fun experience, and it's a foundational piece of media for setting up Strange Reel as a world. There's only a couple of plot holes, like, how does Dijon operate for General Resource when he's a program with no corporeal body? And how does Nemo do the same thing? And who the hell does everyone think they're talking to when they call Nemo? The thing that really bugs me though, and this has been gnawing away at me the entire time I've been writing this, is the question, is Ace Combat 3 actually canon? On the surface, this might seem like a silly question because it's a numbered Ace Combat. However, as we've seen in the true ending, none of this actually happened. The simulation takes place in 2040. Yoko, Martha Inoue, and Abyssal Dijon are killed July 14th, 2030. Sometime in between there, likely 2031 or 2032 if I had to guess, Simon designed his simulation and created Nemo. It is nearly a decade before the events of the game even happen. So, just on the fact that nothing that happens in the game is real except for Simon Cohen's simulation kind of nullifies any notion that the events of Electrosphere are canon. However, there are wrinkles to this, because of course there are. Ace Combat 7 has 2 minor references to Electrosphere, 3 if you stretch it. The first, Yoko Martha Inoue, is mentioned by Dr. Schroeder, but her name was likely mangled in the localization. What should have been Martha ended up being Masa, which is somewhat close to how Martha would be pronounced in Japanese.
I'll be taking the data I've acquired away from the front lines now. Oh, and I'll be taking the girls too. I told my assistant Masa it was time to get Mihai's granddaughters ready to leave here. She's not much older than the girls, but she has a way about her, and I'm sure she won't have any trouble with them.
She would have been about 20 at this time before she attended university, which I find kind of odd. How do you wind up as assistant to a top scientist in the Erusian Air and Space Administration when you don't have a degree? I digress. This is also apparently where she meets Simon, according to the Aces at War 2019 art book. I'll be honest, I looked through this book and couldn't find the source for Simon being there. Apparently other people couldn't either, so Simon being there is contentious at best. Second, Eric Yeager is the son of AC7's Yeager. You know, the guy who's always talking about how he'll tell his son about this or that. This is confirmed by a developer interview from 4Gamer. I had to use Bixby to translate this interview, by the way. Who the hell uses Bixby? Anyway, this connection is also, I think, contentious at best. Maybe the devs wanted a small connection to Electrosphere, maybe they just wanted a guy named Yeager and his character happened to be a father. It still doesn't really help Electrosphere's case for being canon because Eric is overall a minor presence and doesn't have anything to do with the simulation beyond being in it. Third, and this is a real stretch, there's a shipping container in one of the DLC missions for Ace Combat 7 with the General Resource logo on it. This feels more like an Easter egg than actually tying AC7 to 3. By 2019, I think we should be feeling GR's presence a lot more. There are probably other little references that I'm missing, and it's quite difficult to document all of these as there's no central source that does that well. Acepedia isn't exactly up to date At any rate, this video is long enough, and I don't have time to go digging for Easter eggs. Oh, I forgot to mention the expanded timeline. The United Galaxy Space Force is some kind of timeline that Namco created, and it begins with Ace Combat 3. All of Namco's sci-fi IPs fill out the rest of the timeline. Honestly, this is stupid. I don't know why Namco did this. It's just a website with a timeline of smooshed together games. It's a dumping ground for all of their sci-fi shit. This puts Galaga and Dig Dug into the same timeline as Ace Combat. Galaga and Dig Dug. Mr. Driller? The Rising of Gorb? I refuse. I refuse to accept this thrown together garbage, Namco. Anyway, I ultimately think that Electrosphere is ripe for a retcon. The confirmed timeline of events that actually happen only goes up to 2031, and even then, I don't feel like Ace Combat 7 is really setting up for it. We've got about a decade of timeline left to fill out, and I suppose whenever Ace Combat 8 happens, we might see an expansion upon the rise of the corporations. Or maybe we won't. Maybe Project Aces will go in a totally different direction, or maybe they'll remake Electrosphere. I don't know. Did this game exist? Are we in a simulation? Am I a program? Well, as a conclusion, man, Electrosphere is a trip. I was not expecting to have to dive so deep into the lore and prowl the internet for scraps of info just to confirm canonicity. It's an ambitious game, not for gameplay, but for the amount of writing that went into it. It's always impressive to see a story from several perspectives and see the same events from different angles. That isn't an easy thing to do right. By the way, I've left a lot of details out. There's way more stuff in this story than what I've covered in this video. I think I understand why Namco never gave us the full version of the game. It's just too much of a visual novel. Sitting through a lot of dialogue just wasn't in vogue for gaming yet. Perhaps Electrosphere was just ahead of its time. Go on, play Ace Combat 3 if you haven't already. Man, this has taken a lot of my time to make. I hope you guys have enjoyed watching this. I want to thank everybody for the currently over 10,000 views on my Ace Combat 7 video. That thing is doing way better than I expected it to. I can see that the Ace Combat community is very hungry for content. Hopefully, this has sated your hunger. Time for the standard YouTuber BS. Most of you are not subscribed. I'd appreciate it if you did. I'm aiming for monthly uploads, though if I do more projects like this, it might be a little bit slower than that. At any rate, I'm going to give Flight Games a break. I'll probably return to them, but I really need a brain cleanse. Do give me any ideas you'd like to see, I keep those in mind. In particular, big thanks to DP Nemo, I see what you did there, for suggesting that I play Ace Combat 3. See you next time for whatever it is that I make.